Dawn broke as some of the students lazily murmured, while those who had been able to sleep with the sounds of zombies outside keeping them awake. Na-Yeon was laying against a wall on the floor with Cheong-san sleeping, resting his head on her lap. Anjo was sitting right next to her, and those that had been able to sleep started to wake up. Na-Yeon opened her eyes and she looked around before looking down at her lap. Cheong-san still looked tired, as if the life was drained out of him. She could remember his muffled cries throughout the night, and he kept on uttering "Mom, Mom, Mom." She saw him open his eyes and he gave her a small smile that didn't seem to reach his eyes. "Morning," he said as he got up quickly, looking around at the rest of the room. Everyone was once again sitting dejectedly in the room, now only joined by a few new faces. Woo-jin was happy as they had found his big sister and the small group chatting about something, but Cheong-san chose to focus his attention elsewhere. Namra was sitting with Soo-hyuk, their hands laced together as she was thinking of what to do next. Namra could smell Gwinnam nearby. Most likely he was roaming around trying to find the path of least resistance into here, but she chose not to tell the group. What was the use of worrying about something like that right now? She could feel that her hunger had grown, and now she didn't know how long she would be able to hold out. Only the calming of Soo-hyuk's fingers stroking her knuckles was helping her keep those thoughts at bay. The power seemed to be calling to her, telling her that she could easily eat anyone in this room if she, Namra, Soo-hyuk asked, breaking her out from that dangerous training of thought. "Yes. What is it?" she asked back with some semblance of calm restored on her face, but she could tell by the look on his face that he didn't fully buy it. "What do you think we should do next?" he asked, and she was grateful that he didn't question her about behavior, although a part of her wished he had so she wouldn't be a danger to them all. But what was the plan now that everything they had almost set out to do almost blew up in their face? She didn't need to answer though, as the sound of Junyoung and the girl, was it Park Mi-jin? Were arguing about how they could get out of this room. Her staring at the two arguing drew Soo-hyuk's attention to them as well as everyone in the room. "We can just stack them high and move out." "No, that wouldn't work. It would be unstable and could topple over easy if some of them try to push it, but it's better than them being able to just climb over it." The two keep on shouting at each other till enough. Hari shouts, immediately shutting the two up. Hari walked over and looked at their two plans before she turned to face the rest of the group. "Okay, you have both seen their plans, so which one are you willing to put your life on?" she asked, looking over at everyone. "So those that want us to do Mi-jin's plan, raise your hands." She waited as she took count. "Okay, and those that support Junyoung's plan?" A lot more people raised their hands, including Soo-hyuk. His plan was better as it meant they wouldn't have to split up as much and could all stay in one barricade. Mi-jin just smirked. "Let's hope that your plan doesn't get us killed," she said, angry, moving past him. So the plan to build a mobile shield that they could all fit inside began, with everything helping as fast as they could. They wanted to make sure that they got this done during the day, because if they messed it up then doing it at night, from their previous experience, they knew they would lose more people. It was just approaching the afternoon as they heard some siren in the distance that quickly faded, which was odd, but what was more important was they had done it. They nodded at each as if they silently were hoping to communicate their hope and prayers to survive. When the door opened, the zombies immediately rushed toward them but clashed into the barricade. Dae-soo and Woo-jin were at the front and helped push the first wave back, allowing for the moving barricade to come out of the room. They had immediately closed off the barricade and all started pushing, with some fighting off any zombies that held the moving barricade too long and slowed them down. Namra was doing her best with her super strength to push the barrier along with the others, but she could see just how the zombies didn't even pay attention to her. But they looked past her and roared behind her at her friends as if she was one of them, as if She was playing human. They kept on pushing the barricade till too many zombies surrounded them, bringing them to a halt no matter how much effort they put into pushing it. That's when something Mi-jin had brought up started happening, as some of the zombies started making attempts to climb the barricade. Some in the group broke off to try and fight the zombies that were climbing and push them back. "You see, I fucking told you," Mi-jin screamed as she pushed back the zombies against the barricade. Jun-young knew that this had been his plan and he was going to take responsibility to make sure everyone made it out. So while everyone was defending each of their sides, he fought in doing his best to protect his fellow survivors that started making some progress as most of the zombies were trying to climb up and in. They each fought hard till one zombie rushed up the barricade and climbed up with frightening speed and was now ready to leap on the first person it caught sight of. Mi-jin. Jun-young caught sight of this and rushed to defend her as she was trying to hold off the barricade and some zombies. Mi-jin saw the zombie and froze. And as it made to jump for her, Jun-young got in front of her and attacked it. He fought the zombie for a while trying to throw it out, and as they fought it tried to make another leap at Mi-jin, but Jun-young caught it and used all his strength to push it out, but it bit into his hand during their struggle. The zombie was outside and Mi-jin just stared at Jun-young as he looked at the bite and then stared at the group. No one knew what to do, but Jun-young was going to do his best to get them out of there. Jun-young headed for the barrier in a run and Mi-jin screamed, "What are you doing, idiot?" as she tried to stop him. Dae-soo wanted to stop him too, but when he tried to move, the zombies pushed up the barricade and he had to hold firm. Taking responsibility, shouted as he dove over the barricade and started pulling off zombies as fast as he could. Jun-young batted some of them away and kicked away the others, all while Mi-jin screamed for him with tears running down her face to get back in the barricade. The zombies eventually noticed Jun-young and started charging at him, and although he still had fight in him, their numbers were too many, as they tackled him and he disappeared underneath a horde of zombies. Mi-jin screamed as she thought that he died because of her, but she was brought back to her senses as other zombies knocked onto the barricade. They had pushed their way toward the exit and were now by the door, and as they worked to get closer, Mi-jin didn't know why she turned, but she looked, maybe with a little hope that he was okay. She couldn't help herself. She saw Jun-young, or what used to be Jun-young. His body had been mauled and was covered in bites and tears. She saw his body twitching, cracking and twisting unnaturally as it stood up and started charging at the barricade. The zombies attacked and Mi-jin just stepped back as far as she could. She didn't want to see him like this. Didn't want to see anyone like this. Cheong-san stepped forward intending to beat the zombie away, but when he looked at it he couldn't. He just kept looking back at the others, not knowing what to do. This was their friend. He felt so conflicted as he pushed away the zombie, not really wanting to harm it. They got to the door and set up the barricade around it as Shenjo went to try the door. "It's locked," she shouted as she started slamming her shit against it. "What do you mean it's locked?" Mi-jin shouted as she batted back some zombies. Shenjo kept on banging her shoulder against the door repeatedly, again and again, till she stepped back her shoulder in so much pain as she held it, but she pushed on ready to go again, and as she charged, the door opened. With a light shining from behind him stood a man. "No, her father, Dad, Shenjo." She rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him as she cried. He had come for her. She didn't believe he had actually come. She felt him wrap his arms around her before she remembered her friends. "Come, let's go," Shenjo's father shouted at them as they rushed out of the door. Shenjo's dad quickly shut the door as the last of the group came outside. The zombies were banging against the door and some were already starting to gather in the area, most likely drawn by the noise. "Let's go," Shenjo's dad said as he started going away from the school, and they gladly followed as the zombies started giving chase. Cheong-san grabbed Na-Yeon's hand as they started running up the hill. She almost tripped with the pace they were going, but he made sure to help her up. The group kept on running till they saw the tennis court. "Quick inside," Jo's dad said as they rushed into the tennis court, and he locked the door behind them. They ran to the other side, but to their hope, the door was locked with some zombies on the outside. They were trapped. "What do we do now?" Mi-jin asked as she pulled at her hair, looking at their situation. The zombies they had left behind them started slamming against the door they had locked down, and they could only watch helplessly as the zombies broke through. Cheong-san, Soo-hyuk and Mi-jin lured them to the tennis court nets as they started batting them away, but they were too many. Jo's father saw this and glanced at his daughter. She looked scared and helpless as more zombies kept rushing into the court, and he knew what he had to do. Everyone was distracted, but Jo turned to see her dad fusing with his bag, and then he pulled out a flare. The light and sound of the flare drew the attention of the zombies. He threw the flare to the far corner of the tennis court. The zombies rushed toward it, nearly crushing each other as they tried to reach out for it. "Go now!" Jo's dad screamed at them as everyone immediately started running toward the door. Even the zombies on the outside had gone to the side where the flare had been dropped. But the flare was burning out quickly as some of the zombies started to look at them. Jo's dad got in between the zombies and her as he started fighting some of them off. Jo and the others rushed outside with her dad right behind them, but she was surprised as she heard the door shut behind her. She turned around and saw her dad holding the door shut as he tried to lock it. "Dad, what are you doing?" she screamed out as she rushed back to the door. He just stared at her before his eyes moved down to his hand and she saw it, the bite. "Listen to me, Jo. I need you to run now," she shouted as she tried pulling on the door. "I need you to make it okay," he said, looking at her in the eyes and then back at Cheong-san. "I need her to make it," he said as if a plea, because it was one. Cheong-san nodded at him as the rest of the group started to pull her back. The flare had run out and the zombies were now catching on, including the ones outside the tennis court with them. Jo's dad started blowing a loud whistle to draw them to him, and many did, but more chased after Jo and the group as Jo cried out for her dad. The zombies behind them continued to give chase as they kept on running as fast as they could, trying not to look behind them. They saw more zombies in the distance that were going to corner them and were forced to run into an unfinished building. Everyone was struggling for breath but didn't slow down as they ran as fast as they could up the unfinished stairs. There was no way down. They looked around before Namra saw a platform outside the window close by, and before the zombies got up they all rushed onto the outside platform outside the window. It was sketchy outside on the platform, but they saw that they had now ended up on some scaffolding. They moved away from the window as they heard the zombies reach the floor and room they were in before. Na-Yeon stood behind Cheong-san, her grip tight on his clothes. Their hands hadn't let go of each other since they had broken out of the auditorium. Everyone waited nervously to see if the zombies would rush out onto the platform, but nothing happened. They could hear them, but they weren't coming. "I think we can relax," Namra said as she sat down. It took a moment of everyone a few moments to calm down before each of them sat down. They were all still breathing heavily, but they were safe for now. Cheong-san saw Jo, who sat down against the wall with her arms wrapped around her legs looking out at nothing. He tried to approach her but she brushed him off. "I just want to be alone for a moment," she said with no malice in her voice, just tiredness. He nodded in acceptance. He could guess she needed time to process, but even so, she was his childhood friend. So he sat down next to her, and not too long after Na-Yeon sat down next to him. He could guess by how she was acting that she still felt like she was intruding. He once again felt her slip her hand into his out of sight of anyone, and he gave her a small reassuring squeeze before giving her a small glance. On the other side, Namra was struggling. Her hunger had grown even more as she had to use her super strength to help hold with the barricade. Namra she heard and looked to her side and saw the worried face of Soo-hyuk looking over her. He saw the shakiness in her hands and looked back at the others. No one else had noticed, so he grabbed her hands. "Hey, I need you to focus on me." She did just that, breathing in and out slowly. She tried to focus on the blurry vision of his face, and slowly but sure it started to come back. They all sat down in silence. What else could they do? They were surrounded now without most of their gear. It was the rooftop all over again. "Do you hear that?" Namra asked before she stood up again. "It's a message. I think it's the army." That surprised everyone as they were all spurred to attention. "Really, the army? What are they saying?" Namra proceeded to relay the message to everyone, and with each word their faces morphed. "What the hell are we supposed to do now?" Mi-jin whisper shouted to the others. There was nowhere for them to hide from the bombs that the army was planning to drop on the city. Cheong-san, a loud voice shouted, and Cheong-san didn't need to even see the face to know who it was. "Gwenom? That bastard just can't die," Daisu said as he got up and the others got ready. He kept on shouting out Cheong-san's name till he went quiet. They held their breath. It was quiet. Too quiet. Cheong-san, a voice rang out by the window as Gwenom stuck his head through the opening with a twisted smile. Soo-hyuk swung at him, but Gwenom smacked him back, pushing him toward the edge where he now hung loosely with zombies and a long fall down below. Namra tried to attack but was kicked away into the group. Cheong-san stepped up and swung a bat at Gwenom, but he easily held it and then chucked it away before starting to beat Cheong-san. Gwenom slammed Cheong-san on the scaffolding and then stepped on him, laughing. Na-Yeon held her weapon and wanted to charge in, but Anjo held her back. "Let me go, we have to help Cheong-san." Anjo wanted to help too, but what was the point of getting themselves killed, especially with the look and smile Gwenom gave them was almost as if he was daring them to do something. "He wants us to attack and he has got Cheong-san," she said, trying to calm Na-Yeon down. Gwenom got down and started squeezing Cheong-san's neck, almost as if he wanted to enjoy torturing him before he took his eye. Namra pushed through and attacked Gwenom with her power again, managing to push him off Cheong-san before she was kicked back easily. But the distraction had worked as Cheong-san started fighting again with Gwenom. The bully was mad as he grabbed Cheong-san's arm and bit down on his hand. Na-Yeon could hear herself scream as she saw Gwenom land the bite and tried more to break away from the group and help him. Suddenly Gwenom let out a scream, and so did Namra. Cheong-san kicked him back as they fought again. No matter how much he tried though, Gwenom powered through, and it wasn't long before Cheong-san was overpowered again, with Gwenom trying to choke him out over the edge of the scaffolding. He screamed again, grabbing his ears, and Cheong-san took the opportunity to flip Gwenom over him far down to the ground below. He stood up, breathing heavily as he looked over the edge of the scaffolding. He knew that Gwenom was probably still alive if he survived being thrown from the roof. Cheong-san, he heard a voice weakly whisper from his side, and he turned to see Na-Yeon held back by Anjo looking at him with teary eyes. Cheong